Welcome into the Full Tilt Devy podcast on the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network. The college football regular season is officially over, but we're here to get you ready for the offseason with your hosts, Mr. John Arrington and Andy Starr.
What's up, guys? I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Andy at AStarFF on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Heisman finalists and, getting into maybe if you've heard like one or two names jumped into the transfer portal. So we're going to just cover, the small bit of news.
Just a couple.
Wait, I'm hearing that there's over 1,100 people, 1,100 players that have jumped into the transfer portal.
Jesus.
It's pretty wild. So we're going to be covering all of that tonight. But like I said, we're going to jump into the Heisman finalists first. But first, let's check with Andy. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'm flying high this week. Scott Fishbowl team finished, I think, 20th after last week. So moving into round 3 of the playoffs.
Let's go.
I'm
That's what we like to hear. Making us look good, baby.
Telling you. Full tilt squad.
I missed the Scott Fishbowl playoffs by literally like 0.8 points. It was pretty wild. So I'm not riding high like you are, but I can definitely ride off your coattails.
It's fun, man. I lucked into it I think I drafted out of the 5 spot, and my team's loaded with like some mid-round guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Jacobs who've just popped off. Ramondre.
Hell yeah.
But
Jacobs,
we'll take it.
Drafting Jacobs definitely helped this year.
Oh yeah. That might end up being a league winner for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Speaking of what used to mean league winner, the Heisman. What's going on? Here's your Heisman finalist. Stop me if you've heard these names before. Max Duggan. Let's see. Who else do we have? We have I can't even remember his name.
Stetson
Bennett.
Thank you. Stetson Bennett.
The mailman.
And then of course CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams. So it's all QBs, of course, and it's all playoff team QBs, of course.
Except for Caleb Williams.
Well, yeah, of course, except for Caleb Williams.
Right.
I don't know. I hate it all. What do you think?
Yes. Max Duggan, I'll get into that some more, but I'm not as against it as I am the Stetson Bennett, but Max Duggan, he wasn't even the starter for his team at the start of the year. Now, granted, that's not really a criteria for the Heisman. He did have a good season. But these guys are just, game manager type quarterbacks on good teams. And, you think about Georgia, I don't think people consider Stetson Bennett even like the best player on that offense. He's definitely not the best player on the team. There's half the guys in the defense are more important to that team than Stetson Bennett is. But, he had an efficient season. His QBR was like 85-ish or something, 20 touchdowns to the air, six picks. And, he had 7 touchdowns on the ground too. But this is an individual award. This isn't like a team award. And it's starting to feel like a team award that goes directly to the team's quarterback. And I just don't agree with that. Same thing with Duggan. Like, Duggan's not Duggan without Quentin Johnston and Kendre Miller. Bennett, he needed guys like Brock Bowers and, some of those Georgia running backs to really have an effective offense. Both were mega efficient. Like I said, they won games. And I don't want to belittle their seasons because, they played well. I just think the Heisman should be more of like I don't want to say more of like the MVP award, because the NFL MVP is kind of turned into this too, where it's just sort of the team award that's awarded to the team's quarterback. But it needs some sort of restructuring in my mind. Caleb Williams, I think he's deserving of it. He had a heck of a season, after transferring. CJ Stroud, I'm not going to complain about that either. He kind of just did the same thing he did last year, which wasn't enough to win it then. It's not going to be enough to win it now either. But I do have some snubs. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts besides that either.
Yeah, obviously I haven't truly paid attention in the past or like the recent past of, how much it's been like the actual person that mattered the most, like that kind of thing, the best player in college. I feel like last year they got it right with Bryce Young, like the way that he was playing, everything just seemed to work out the the national championship game where Jameson Williams gets hurt and everything. And we know that, especially now, we know that their wide receiver core beyond Jameson Williams and and John Mechie and those players wasn't the greatest. And so maybe we can't truly blame him. But beyond or before that, I feel like Bryce Young really was like the best player in college football last year. Now this year he definitely was not. I cannot say that about any of these players. And I know everyone's saying like Caleb Williams is going to run away with it, and maybe he will. I don't know that he's actually the best player in college football, like the way that he played this year or anything. I mean, he did very well. I don't even know if I'd say very well. He did well in a shit conference. Like he did good. And with Jordan Addison, like the one of the top wide receivers in the game on his team. And I'm not like trying to discount Williams there, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, can't we give Jordan Addison some props too? I don't know that it was all him, and they obviously weren't perfect. And just the fact that they lost to Utah twice and everything, it just kind of gives me a bad taste in my mouth to say that he's the best player in college football, because obviously it's a team sport and all. I get all that, but I feel like they would probably. I hate him because I love athletic players. What the hell are you talking about? But I don't know. I feel like this year, honestly, like no players should get the Heisman. That's just my initial opinion. Obviously, that's not going to happen, and no one truly cares what I think. But that would be my opinion. All right, we're just calling it off this year, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say I agree with it, but we're just tiptoeing around. Like, these guys obviously had great seasons. We're not trying to take a crap on their season
except for Stetson Bennett. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Stetson Bennett had a good Stetson Bennett season.
He did. He actually, for Stetson Bennett purposes, He actually had a pretty damn good year.
Right, exactly. But I mean, people want to talk about Bijan Robinson, so I will agree that he had like probably the best statistical season out of anyone in this, the Power 5 conference. Almost 1,900 yards, 20 touchdowns. But like I said, this is starting to be a team award. And his team wasn't successful. But if you look at it, every other playoff team, like you said, has a finalist except for Michigan. So my question is, why not Blake Corum? He had 1,500 yards of total offense, 19 touchdowns. He was the best player for that offense and a big reason why they're in the playoff. And I think if he doesn't injure his knee and he puts even half of what Donovan Edwards did in that Ohio State game on way to a victory, there's no question that you have to put him as a finalist. If he's at 1,600 yards, over 20 touchdowns, an undefeated Michigan Big Ten championship where they don't really pass the ball that much. Like, I mean, that would be a no-brainer for me. But again, it just seemed like it's a team success award that goes to the quarterback.
And he's the only player that I can think of that, had a shot that hurt his knee. I mean, I can't think of anyone else. Like, I don't know about Lucas.
Sorry, I just need to clear my throat there. I will try not to spend a whole hour on this. But come on, Hendon Hooker isn't even a finalist? He is the SEC coaches and AP Offensive Player of the Year, first team quarterback. And he doesn't even make it to New York. Looking at the way the finalists kind of turned out, it seems like the committee kind of just like, we're going to put a filter on players because we didn't watch any of college football this season. And we're going to filter it so you had to play 12 games. So sorry, Blake Corum. Sorry, Hendon Hooker. Yeah, y'all tried, but no can do. And Thomas saying can't give it to a 37-year-old quarterback. Stetson Bennett's older than Hendon Hooker and is a finalist and played in 2 more games, and that's the only reason his stats are even semi-close. You can't be a Heisman finalist and not throw a touchdown in 4 games. That is absolutely absurd. But
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
bad.
I'll stop before
He was
we
he
lose.
was well on his way though. Like Hooker easily would have been the Heisman. I think Corum would have easily been the Heisman because they actually mattered to their teams. And not to say that these other players didn't. I just feel like they mattered more. Corum really deserved it. Hooker really deserved it. I mean, honestly, like both. I feel bad. I feel terrible for Hooker because it honestly could have been the difference between him being like a second round pick and like a fifth round pick, like we talked about before. Corum, I don't think it's going to truly hurt him. Although, like I guess we can't guarantee anything. I think they were talking about him having surgery and stuff, and so I guess it could hurt him in the grand scheme of things. But both of them deserved it, and I mean, I've seen in the past, like who wins the Heisman, and it always seems to be like the best players, and I just don't know that we're getting that this year.
Yeah, it like I said, it just felt kind of dirty this year. But you bring up a good point that nobody really had like a dominant season this year. It didn't feel like anyway.
I will admit that I don't think, like, with the South Carolina loss, I don't think Hendon Hooker had a chance of actually winning it. I think that if you stop the voting after 12 weeks, Caleb Williams ends up winning this award if you don't look at the conference championship. But I still thought he had a good enough season to garner that recognition and make it to New York. Similar to where Tennessee ended up finishing sixth, and this kind of goes into your all's next thing for the CFP. I didn't really think that Tennessee stood a shot or deserved to be in the playoff. But also having Alabama above them, who they beat, it's just there's a lot of very questionable things happening right now in the way that people are doing rankings, not only for teams but also for these individual awards.
I think we've seen it time and time again that like every year at the end of the year, Bama always jumps like 2 spots right as the college football playoff ranks come out, whether it's from 3-1 or or 5-3 or whatever it is. And this time it was like 7-5. And I think you just have to expect it. It's always going to happen. I think also if Hendon Hooker is not injured, then Tennessee is probably ahead of Alabama. But you have to admit that they're not the same team without Hendon Hooker, which is a perfect example of why he should have been a Heisman finalist.
Right. No, exactly. That's exactly the reason why that they were ranked higher. Without Hendon Hooker, they're a different team, and the College Football Playoff Committee's job is to pick the best teams at that moment in time, not like from the season, in general. And I will just say that I think they got it right. I would have been upset if Alabama did get in. I am a little upset that Ohio State got in, but I honestly don't think that there's a fourth team that really deserved to be there. So if you're going to put somebody in there to get housed by Georgia, then sure, let it be Ohio State. But it doesn't really matter. Like there wasn't a fourth team deserving of a playoff spot. TCU,
at least it's a different game. It's not the same game that we already watched with Bama losing and all that. Like at least it's something new this year.
No, exactly. And I'm happy that they kept TCU at 3 despite losing the Big 12 championship game because it was a close game. It was an overtime loss, so I don't think you can punish them too much. And it's a team that they beat already once this year. Whereas with USC, I had argued last week that maybe they should still be in if they lose again to Utah, but they got throttled by Utah by like 23, 24 points. So at that point, you just can't justify putting them in. I mean, I would put Utah in over them. They beat them twice, but so USC, yeah, they're out. So at that point, you just got to look who's left. Ohio State only has 1 loss, and it's to the number 2 team in the country. So there's your answer, I guess.
I think this is one of the easiest years that they had. It might not have been easy had things played out differently, but the way that it played out, there was really no other way. I think they got it 100% right.
Yeah. And as long as, nothing crazy happens, it should, Ohio State should rightfully just lose right away first round and Georgia will move on. I think the Michigan versus TCU game is going to be a lot more intriguing because both of them are kind of slow starters. They don't really get going until the second half. and they both kind of rely on that running game and, playing good defense. So we'll see what happens there. I think whatever team jumps out with a lead first is just going to play keep away, and it's going to be tough for the other one to come back. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to pick one way or the other at this point. I'd like to see Michigan win because that's where I live, but we'll see what happens.
Sorry, my computer popped up and told me that there's an accident on my street, which I've never seen before. Like, I didn't know my computer gave me like traffic news and stuff, but apparently it does.
It's a little creepy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but I guess it's a good thing. It's a new computer, so apparently I'm learning features as we go. Speaking of learning as we go, Andy, I have a difficult question for you.
All right.
Would you call yourself, or would you consider yourself a Wisconsin Badgers fan?
Yes. Yep. I'm from. Sorry, go ahead. Finish your question.
Would you consider yourself a Wisconsin super fan?
No. I've never even been to Camp Randall, so I feel like I need to go there to be a super fan. But you
care about Wisconsin.
Yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin, so that was like, I'm a Packers fan.
You pay attention to Wisconsin football.
I do from time to time.
It was brought to my attention recently on the last podcast. You spoke of one Barry Alvarez as the athletic director for the Wisconsin Badgers. Is Barry Alvarez the athletic director of the Wisconsin Badgers?
Is he not anymore?
He has not been since like mid 2021.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not too long ago. He's old.
No, yeah, it wasn't too long ago, but yeah, it's now what's his name? Chris something, I think. I had it here. Oh, Chris McIntosh is the AD for the Badgers now.
Who brought that to your attention?
My buddy Levi that I was talking about. This is the big Nebraska fan from last week. He always listens, and he was like, "Wait, he's talking about Barry Alvarez. He hasn't even been the AD for like a year and a half."
Man, that's embarrassing. No, I
told him I was going to give you crap, so I had.
He's been there. He's been like with the program for like 30 decades. So I just assume he still has his hands in something,
Oh man, I'm just playing around, but I had to give you some crap about it. I mean,
that's fine.
I couldn't tell you. I call myself a Gator fan. I could not tell you who the AD is for Florida, so I'm not trying to act like holier than thou.
Good thing I don't work for ESPN or anything like that.
Exactly, but we have fun here. All right, so why don't we take a quick little break, and then we will get into the transfer portal madness.
My budgie smuggler of the week. He's walking into Detroit, coming off a kind of a poor game. He had a good fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens in a game in which that I don't feel like talking about still. But the weeks leading up to that, look, he put up. I'm looking at somebody else's 25.8 fantasy points against Indy, 19.2 fantasy points against the Chargers, 21.6 fantasy points against Vegas, and 31.5 fantasy points against Kansas City. All good matchups against four slot receivers. And guess what? He's back in it against Detroit. Christian Kirk has the third best schedule adjusted matchup for opposing slot wide receivers at plus 2.9 fantasy points over expected.
Was that from last week or this week?
It was last week before they played the Lions.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that was a good call. He had a good game, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he did all right.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this week I'm a little worried with T-Law not playing or possibly not playing with the injured foot and all that kind of stuff. But
Yep, we went 2 out of 3 on the walkabout for our budgie smugglers. I won't say who was wrong. But
did somebody say Deontay Johnson? That's
oh god,
I'll just mute myself now.
Oh no! Oh, I heard that. Why? Why?
All right, here I'll defend myself because now I got to. Atlanta sucks for wide receiver matchups, and I was like, you know what? They also suck against quarterbacks. This is the week for Deontay Johnson to get right if he's ever going to get right this season. And they tried. They gave him 12 targets? He only caught 4. It wasn't the worst day. It wasn't a George Pickens day now. So at least I didn't say George Pickens. But yeah, not a great week.
I mean, the Giants had an easy matchup last week. I didn't say start Kenny Golladay. Like, come on.
He sat out for some reason too, which is funny. Kenny Golladay.
Who cares? He's terrible. I'm just giving you shit. All right, so now we're going to talk about the transfer portal and everything that's going on with that. It really is insane, but I guess it had to be expected. You know, we knew this was coming. Can I say something? I know this has kind of become my thing, but can I say something a little controversial?
Yes.
I don't think that I think there might be like 5 out of the 1,100 players that actually matter.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's kind of the theme of what I'm about to talk about. I will say, I think the quarterbacks, for one, like the names that jumped in the quarterback portal, I was like, oh man, that's a lot of people. But then I'm just thinking to myself, like, these guys aren't good. They're not going to go be good somewhere else.
Yeah, I will say, like, C2C leagues, the campus side of the C2C leagues could like change drastically because of all these changes.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know that like Devy leagues are going to drastically change because of these changes.
No. And yeah, I kind of agree with you. I guess we'll just jump into it with the quarterbacks. And that's kind of what my first point was, like, at least in recent memory, the quarterbacks who we've seen falter at one school don't seem to recover after the transfer. And so, like, recent memory, that would be Spencer Rattler, Keaton Slovis, who's in the transfer portal again, Casey Thompson, JT Barrett, JT Barrett, who's now in the portal again for the third time. So that precedent of guys just kind of curbs your enthusiasm for a lot of these transfer portal dudes. So I'm at least somewhat intrigued by Hudson Card, the guy from Texas. He played well enough when Ewers was out, just unfortunately finds himself in a roster with 2 of the best recruits of all time. But he had a QBR around 80. Yards per attempt was over 8. I think he has a chance to raise his profile somewhere. But everyone else on the list of transfer portals, who I'll just pull that up right now. But it's like obviously Hudson Card, and where are we at here? Pulling it up. Sorry, guys.
No, we got DJU, Keaton
Slovis, Spencer Sanders, Austin Reed, Mike Wright from Vanderbilt, Devin Leary, Drew Pine from Notre Dame, and then Graham Mertz from my Badgers, who I know nothing about. But yeah, all those guys are horrible. I mean, I don't think any of them had a QBR over 70, so they're not just going to go light the world on fire somewhere else. Now, when you do have a transfer portal success, it's guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Fields, where they didn't get that opportunity at the first school because the coaching staff chose somebody different, and then they go somewhere else, and turns out they are good. That didn't happen.
That's what I was just about to say. Yeah, I think it's the guys that don't get to show it that are like, all right, yeah, like I can still believe in them. I think I said that last week on the show. Like, these guys that don't really get a shot, I can still believe in them. But when you get I said it about Jackson Dart. Like, when you see Jackson Dart, you can't believe in him anymore. When you see DJU do what he's done the last 2 years, you can't go, well, look, but what about those 4 games in 2020?
Right. So here's a name that if you wanted to think along those same lines, Nick Evers, who was a freshman this year, he was a highly recruited quarterback out of Oklahoma. I think he was probably initially recruited by Lincoln Riley and just sort of ended up going to Oklahoma. And then obviously things didn't work out there. They went with Dylan Gabriel, who I don't know what his eligibility is like. He's pretty old too. But obviously Evers is now in the transfer portal. I think he's a guy, if you're looking for somebody in the portal that could potentially see a rise in Devy value. But, I don't know, that I'm just basing that off of, guys that haven't had a chance that might get a chance somewhere else.
I mean, Evers is definitely a name that I've heard quite a bit about. Like, there was definitely some hype there. So I like that. I mean, I really do think, not to say that no one can transfer and get better or anything like that. I just think that at this point, we kind of know who these players are, especially like Slovis and Spencer Sanders and like those guys, like we know who those players are. Drew Pine, like I feel like we know who he is. Like,
Yeah, I mean he's all right.
yeah, exactly. Like probably more college QBs. DJU, I mean, I feel like if he couldn't get it done there, I can't imagine it's going to get that much better. Like maybe he can be a backup at some point or something. I don't see him being an NFL starter at this point. It just doesn't make sense. I get what you're saying about Hudson Card. He was not terrible by any means, and he only had a small small sample, so at least he wasn't god awful.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Like if you got to pick someone that's done something so far, Hudson Card is really the only guy that I could think of.
And it was definitely not your boy Mertz. I can promise you that. It was god awful, or has been god awful.
He was not good. He had a couple good games.
What do you all think about some of these seniors or upperclassmen who were starters and actually fairly successful, like Spencer Sanders, like oh my gosh, why did I lose his name? Devin Leary. Like those two in particular, I look at as going, okay, they can go to a team that was probably faltering a little bit, and they are going to help that team maybe win a couple more games. I don't know if that will drastically improve their future NFL draft stock like Hudson Card has the chance to. I do look at those two names in particular and go, if anyone's going to make a big move, especially for their future team, and especially in your C2C leagues, those are the two you want to be targeting.
Yeah.
I mean, Leary was a decent prospect going into the year. Not like amazing or anything like that, but man, I don't know if it was injuries or they like didn't have anyone to throw to or whatever, but I mean, like he fell off hard just looking at the numbers. You're talking about, I've talked about in the past how I look at adjusted yards per attempt. Like that's one of the biggest metrics that I look at for QBs. It's just so easy if you can see a guy either has it or doesn't have it pretty easily. And not to say that that's the only thing I look at, but he had a 9.1 adjusted yards per attempt, which is not amazing, but it's pretty good. It's decent. It's good enough. And then this year he had a 6.8. And I'm sure there's context. Maybe Andy, knows more than I do. Maybe he could tell me why, but everything fell off. But that's a major, major fall off. 9.1 to 6.8, huge fall off.
Yeah, I mean, they lost some running backs and like Zonovan Knight, who's now, everyone's favorite waiver wire ad. But I don't know. Things change, and it could be an injury, could be some change on the coaching staff. Who knows? But yeah, he fell off hard, and maybe because he was getting, NFL draft buzz at the start of the season. So that is a name there. If he goes to a different spot, maybe he does turn it around.
But of course, now he's going to be a super senior, and it's just like, what are the odds for Devy purposes? What are the odds of like you being excited about him? I can't imagine being excited about him. Maybe he can turn it around somewhere else, but at this point, it feels more of a C2C play.
Yeah, well, it just kind of leads into our next point, where like where are the landing spots that you want to see some of these guys go to, and then the first obvious one for me is Kentucky because of Will Levis leaving. And apparently anyone who plays at Kentucky in this pro style offense is automatically an NFL first rounder. So yeah, put Devin Leary there and he's a top 10 pick.
There we go.
They
Doesn't
did
matter
fire
how he
their
plays, right?
offensive coordinator though. So we will see who they end up bringing in.
Oh, that's true. But yeah, I mean, so Kentucky, Florida obviously is going to be looking for someone potentially. I don't know if they're going to look in the portal.
No, don't. We already had terrible QBs. We don't need more. Please, God.
And then like everyone in the portal obviously leaves a hole on their roster where they were just at. So, it's just a shuffling the cards, really, just seeing where these guys go. It's already happened.
I was listening to a pod today, and they said there's 1,100 something players in the transfer portal. There is not a place for all these players to go. And I was like, now wait a second. If there's 1,100 players in the portal and they're leaving teams, and that means there's 1,100 spots open for these teams. I don't know. It just seemed like the math wasn't all adding up there.
Well, Because you bring in freshmen and you bring
Yeah, I
in
mean, I guess if they're replacing the spots, but it
right.
was just funny. I was thinking I was laughing to myself. I'm like, well, that's not really how math works. But yeah,
No, I hear what you say. Yeah,
in hindsight, I definitely
there's
see it.
not 1100 D1 spots. Or FBS spots. Like they could transfer and
No,
go to
I think yeah, I think
FCS
some of them
schools.
are gonna have to drop off. It's gonna have to happen.
Yeah, I mean it happens
But I mean,
every
that's
year.
why they're transferring to try to get a shot somewhere because they can't get playing time. They can't get whatever. Like obviously, some of these guys are leaving because they want a shot. Like I think going into the wide receivers, not to harp on the QBs all night because God, I don't want to talk about them.
Yeah,
But like
right.
getting to the wide receivers, like Dominic Lovett. Dominic Lovett stood out this year. I don't think he's leaving because he couldn't get playing time or he's bad or anything like that. He's leaving because he wants a shot. Like he wants a good team, a good offense, and he's like, screw Missouri. Like I want out of here right now. I I love it. Like I really do. Like I think he's going to be a good player. I'm not saying he's like a lead or anything like that, but I just like saying I love it. But I think that he's probably one of maybe two wide receivers between him and Dorian Singer that I'm most interested in seeing where they land and what happens with that because I was definitely interested in both of them here.
Yeah, I like Lovett. And how about this would be like my dream scenario for Lovett is Drake May, who has said he's staying at UNC, and we assume Josh Downs will probably go pro. Put Lovett in that slot role at
Ooh.
UNC with Drake May. Oh, I would
Oh,
love that.
talk dirty to me.
Yeah. But the other guy that I like is Ryan O'Keefe. 73 catches this year, back-to-back seasons with over 70 catches. Also back-to-back seasons with over 200 rush yards. And I've heard has ties to the new Auburn coaching regime. And I discussed a couple weeks ago what Hugh Freeze can do for wide receivers in the past. So I think that's a name to watch this offseason if he ends up in a good spot. Some of the other names in there, Dante Thornton, who's a guy I loved preseason, didn't really happen for him. So I think it's going to not get better for him elsewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the high end hopes for him are probably gone.
Yeah.
But like I think maybe going somewhere else, like Oregon isn't the best offense or anything like that. Maybe going somewhere else, he can kind of like get back onto like the day 3. He's probably still on the day 3 track right now. Maybe he can try to get to the back end day 2 track, at a different team.
It's possible, but he's a guy that I'm not going to draft anywhere this offseason. And if he does end up in like some flashy landing spot, it's probably time to trade him for whatever shares you can get for whatever that value boost is that it provides. And kind of the same thing with JoJo Earl, unfortunately. If he couldn't do it with Bryce Young this year in a wide open wide receiver depth chart, I don't know what chance he has anywhere else. And it hurts to say that as a guy who has a lot of JoJo shares.
People were all over JoJo, and I know he had the injury, and maybe that had something to do with it because he came back fairly quickly. I think originally they kind of said he was out for the year, and they're like, "Oh, he can come back week 8 or whatever," and he did. He might even come back before that.
It was he's played it in a few games for sure.
And I feel like there was one game where maybe he blew up or had a decent game, and that was basically it. But like you said, it's this year with Alabama. If you can't make it in Alabama this year, not to say that we've talked about how that offense isn't clicking or wasn't clicking, but yeah, I can't have high hopes. He's a great prospect, and I wouldn't say sell him for nothing. If you have him,
no,
because he seems like the kind of guy to where you still have the the recruit profile and everything. Like he's probably still going to land in a good spot. Like I don't think he's going G5 or anything like that at this point. So I would not just sell him for nothing, give him away. But I can't imagine that I have like first and second round hopes for him at this point either.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. But speaking of Alabama, Saban has been all over the portal for wide receivers the past 2 years, and he just lost 3 of them to the portal, and Holden, Leary, and of course JoJo Earl. So that's a spot that's going to be maybe prime for the taking of some of these transfer portal wide receivers, which obviously, Alabama wide receiver, you'd love to see that. So, keep an eye on that, I guess.
Someone I've been seeing linked to Alabama is Theo Weiss. I might have screwed up that last name, but the former 5-star recruit for Oklahoma. He's been productive there, but nothing overly impressive, nothing that's going to get him high draft capital. But he's someone who I think could perform similar to what Charlie Jones did at Purdue, someone who actually got himself on a draft radar, had a monster season for them, even though he was bad to wildly mediocre in the past. That's a name I'm looking at going forward. It does seem, though, it's a lot of, aside from Dorian Singer and Dominic Lovett, it's a lot of players who have the potential to be like big play threats, but aren't that traditional alpha that we're looking at, or the elite recruit that Alabama brings in after they were good elsewhere or didn't get even a chance to see the field elsewhere.
Yeah, no.
I was just actually looking up Singer. I really he stood out to me this year. I was big on I think we both were, or maybe all three of us were, on Jacob Cohen going into the year, and then Dorian Singer kind of stood out after the fact. Even after we did our draft and all that kind of stuff, Singer kind of took over at that point. And I just actually looked it up, and an hour ago, Sports Illustrated said that Oregon has made an official offer to Dorian Singer to transfer over there. So it's just kind of funny. We just talked about Deontay Thornton, and now maybe Singer's going to go over there.
Yeah, that's he had 1,100-yard season. Yeah, so if he ends up anywhere in a high volume pass offense, is obviously what we want to see. But I think he's a true sophomore, so he still has that early declare possibility. Yeah, he's definitely an intriguing guy. We're gonna wait and see where him and obviously Dominic Lovett end up, but much better field than the quarterbacks, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's at least some options here, and I think those are the two for the most part. Maybe Earl, I would throw in there, the three that I actually care about. Everyone else, I like Thornton. I have him on my C2C team. I don't have high hopes. That's more of hoping and praying, or that's more praying than hoping, I should say.
Yeah, if he somehow gets a Alabama or something, I think you just need to trade him immediately, because I just don't think it's going to happen. But I could be wrong there. It just feels like Bo Nix had the best season he's ever had in his life, and Troy Franklin played well enough over there. Even their tight end Ferguson did pretty well, and Thornton just really couldn't get anything going. So I just don't have really much confidence in him moving forward.
Speaking of Franklin, if Singer goes over there, I wonder if people start getting a little concerned about Franklin, because I know he's become a hot topic for people, hot button item for everyone, that he's going to be one of the top 24 wide receivers, right?
For me, he is anyway, but I guess that's not a popular take at this point.
No, honestly, I think it is a popular opinion. I think that I'd say most people have Franklin as one of the top wide receivers, and I'm not trying to say that I don't. I'm just wondering if Singer goes over there, if that might affect things.
I don't think so, because teams can handle two wide receivers. If it started to get they had 3 guys or 4 guys that needed to get fed targets, then it starts to get in.
Tell that to Deontay Thornton.
No, I know. That's why I'm saying they only had one guy there. You could be successful in an offense with only one wide receiver, getting targets. You can still get yours too. And he was losing reps or targets at least to Terrence Ferguson. So sorry, Dante Thornton.
All right, and then we got the running backs. There's a couple of guys that I like here too, but once again, for the most part, most of these players are just not good, or not good for Devy purposes, not good for NFL purposes. But we have a couple names in Byron Cardwell. I know a lot of people are really hyped about Carson Steele. I get the Steele hype per se. Like, he has the size, he has the production and everything. So like I get it. I don't know that I love Steele as much as a lot of people. Like I feel like a lot of people are just it kind of feels, maybe not to the same extent. I'm not trying to compare the players or anything like that, but it kind of feels like the Montreal Johnson transfer from last year going into this year, where people were so hyped about him going to Florida. He's going to be the number one, all that kind of stuff. And then like we easily see that Trevor Etienne is a better player, like that kind of thing. And I wonder if it's going to be the same thing with Carson Steele moving from the MAC to, I'm assuming he wants, after I think he had 1,500. Yeah, he had 1,500 rushing yards. Like he had like 1,700 total yards, something around there. Like I think that he's probably hoping to get into a Power 5 conference there, and I just wonder if it's going to be a similar situation there. What do you think about Steele?
Yeah, I would more compare his season to like a guy like Xavier Valladay from Wyoming, who was not the entire offense, but at least his entire rushing offense. And Valladay, was successful at Arizona State. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but at least in Montreal Johnson's case, he was like a 50-50 split when they were at Louisiana Lafayette. But yeah, he's a fun guy. I think if he ends up someplace, he's probably going to go Power 5 somewhere. If he goes to like Syracuse or something like that, that'd be cool. But he's not going to put up 1,500 yards like he did at
Ball State.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm not trying to hate on the player. I don't hate him or anything like that, but I feel like there's been a lot of excitement about him, and I'm just trying to I feel there was a lot of excitement about Montreal Johnson, and not to say that Johnson hasn't done anything or anything. And it's just one example, and I'm not truly trying to comp the players or anything like that. I just feel like I feel like it's a somewhat similar. It looks like when you look at his numbers, and I don't watch Ball State. I don't watch Carson Steele. Like I've never watched the player. I'm just looking at the numbers. When you look at a guy with 5.4 yards per carry in the MAC, it looks like a guy who had a workhorse role, who got a bunch of touches and did what he could do. Like that's all it looks like. It doesn't look like anyone that I'm like overly excited about.
Yeah, I really haven't looked too far into like his analytic profile. It's that's like what I start doing in January, February to really start finding my sleepers for the next Campus Canton season.
I think one of the biggest things is when the receiving average, the yards per reception, matches the yards per carry at 5.4. They have 5.4 yards per carry and 5.7 yards per reception. That's when you kind of know that maybe they're not an overly explosive, overly exciting player.
Yeah,
Ball State played Tennessee in the opener this year, and watching that game, Carson Steele was their offense. That I'm a little sad to see him moving on from Ball State, because I think that he could produce big numbers in college and still have his shot at being drafted, just purely from how impressive he's been with his workload. And it's kind of I don't want to know if he's good. I just want him to get drafted, to get a late pick up on him and just stash him somewhere. But right. I am excited to see where he ends up going. Haven't seen any rumors about him. But looking at some of the elite recruits of yesteryear, particularly, do you all care about Trey Sanders at this point? And what about LJ Johnson from Texas A&M? Those are probably the two highest recruits that are in the transfer portal. I
wanted to talk about Sanders because I've heard a lot of hype about him since he entered the portal. I hate it. I'm not trying to. I really don't like talking bad about this player because I don't think it has anything to do with his actual playing ability. He is not the same player that he was before the terrible car accident that he had. And it just sucks. Like, there's nothing good about it. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to victory lap or anything like that because I like the player before and all that. It's just he's not the same player, and people want to hold on to hope and like he's going to come back from it. It does not seem like he's coming back from it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think a lot of it, at least in our circles with the Devy people, they're probably still holding the bag on their Trey Sanders shares from a couple seasons ago when he was still getting drafted in the third and fourth round, sometimes the second round, even after the car accident. And people are saying, like, stop, don't draft it. He's not going to be playing for Alabama. Then we saw Brian Robinson.
It reminds me of Kevin Harris. Like Kevin Harris was this amazing running back, and then he I forget the exact injury, but he had like some terrible back injury. He's just not the same player, and now he's buried on the Patriots depth chart. It's just you can't be overly excited about these players, unfortunately, that get these major injuries.
Yeah, 100% agrees. LJ Johnson, the other name that Lucas brought up, that's a weird one too, because Texas A&M obviously program is in shambles. And he was behind Devin Achane, and before that, name's escaping me, the guy that couldn't run a 4.6. Isaiah Spiller. So, he's been behind a guy.
The opposite of Devin Achane.
Right, exactly. So, he's been kind of waiting the depth chart, and then he had some injuries that were kind of not really reported on, and he's only played a couple snaps, it seems like, here and there. But he's another guy that Devy guys loved when he came out as a true freshman. Like, he was getting drafted in the third and fourth round in startups in his freshman season. So, he's going into his junior year, unfortunately. He's going to have to find a spot where he can get reps right away. And, maybe that means he has to go down to like the American Athletic Conference or something. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, I can't even remember. Oh, it was, what'd you say, Texas A&M?
Yeah.
I was going to say I couldn't even remember who it was, but as soon as I said that, I realized you just said it. So I was like, wait a second. But yeah, there was a lot of hype. I feel like he would have at least touched the field or done something, and he can't do it. I'm not excited about that. The only other player that I'm truly excited about that entered the portal as a running back is Byron Cardwell. And I think this year really sucked because he probably could or should have entered the NFL. Or no, he was a sophomore, isn't he?
Yeah, so he could have entered the NFL after this season, but yeah, he was hurt.
Yeah, so I think he only played like 2 games, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I see him in the Devy running back model all the time, and I don't know what to do with him. I'm like, he was that good. He's in the top 20 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like, he was that good. I should probably keep him up here. And then I'm like, wait, he hasn't played in like 10 weeks. What do I do? I don't know what to do. And especially now that he's in the transfer portal, I guess at this point, just have to wait and see, where he goes and what happens, what kind of depth chart he's in, that kind of thing. But I believe in the talent. I do believe in that. So I'm not saying he's going to be a stud wherever he goes, but I think that he's probably the only one that like I truly care about to actually pay attention to, like where he ends up and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't really know the specifics of what that injury was, but it seems like Oregon has kind of said like, okay, Bucky Irving's going to be our guy now moving forward, but he could rebound in a big way in the right scenario. So yeah, that's a guy, if the cost isn't too high in the off season, he might be a guy that I'm looking to throw into as like an add-on in C2C or Devy League trades. He's a guy that was going in the third and fourth round in some places last year. So we'll see what happens. But as far as like landing spots for some of these guys, Alabama's the obvious one, losing Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Texas could be really interesting if they should just decide to go that route, but I think they're happy with Jadon Blue. And then, we already talked about how great the 23 class is. They leave behind, massive holes at Syracuse, Oklahoma, Auburn, Arizona State, and then potentially Pitt if my guy Izzy Abanikanda leaves, who I heard you had a flub in the old Beth model regarding him as well.
I did. I'm so glad you brought it up.
So it turns out he
So-
is the best running back of all time, like I said, right?
He apparently he actually jumped up to the number one now.
No.
So on the on the last Debbie devotional, I'm sitting there talking with my co-host Aaron Wilcox, and I just like flatly said, "Oh well, you know, like if Izzy Abonaconda wasn't a senior or something like that," and he didn't even like call me out on it. He just like, "Well, yeah, but he's a junior," and like I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, he's a junior." I said, "Oh, let me go check that." And so I checked it, and sure enough, he's a junior. He's not a senior. And for whatever reason, I had him as a senior. Unfortunately, sometimes when you're dealing with like thousands of college players, you screw something up, and apparently I screwed his up. And then, of course, you start wondering if you screwed something else up because of that. And so I had to go through this weekend, and including this, like going into the week, I went through, I don't know, maybe 700 college players and just made sure I had their right years. It was not
Jesus.
a fun process.
That was horrible.
Yeah, unfortunately, I most of the stuff that I deal with the model is automated. Their year in college is not. I cannot find a way to automate it because, you know, there's players that are in their fourth year that are called freshmen. You know, it's physically impossible. So I have to go through and look at like what year they're in and all that kind of stuff. And for whatever reason, I had him as a fourth year player, and it actually starting to make a lot of sense because you were so into him at the beginning of the year, not so into him, but you were like, oh, this is a guy that I think could break out, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, I hate him. Well, he was a senior. Of course I hated him. And, you know, now come to find out, I probably would have been quite a bit higher on him going into the year had I known that he was going into his junior year. All this is to say that I was wrong. You were right. And he is now
Feels really good.
but at the same time, I don't know if you were trying to appease me or what, but I feel like on the last pod or one of the most recent pods, we talked about how I said I feel like he's going to be like a quality NFL backup or something to that effect. And you're like, oh yeah, I could see that, you know, like that kind of thing. I feel like he's above that now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, he's in a different part of the model than he would have been had he been like he's above Tank Bigsby, of course, you know.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, once again, people are saying Tank Bigsby's a top 5 running back in the NFL, so in the NFL draft. So if he's if Tank is a top 5, then I feel like Izzy has to be top 8. Something like that, you know, in just a general opinion, not even saying mine or yours or anything like that. Obviously, we have them higher than that. So I have a completely different stance on Izzy Abonaconda today than I did last week. And hey, I mean, at least I can admit when I was wrong, right?
Yes, and that's important. I do it all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think he could be a starter. I just don't think he's ever going to be like a bell cow type guy. He's not going to be like relegated to not having any work at all, like, you know, Chuba Hubbard was when Christian McCaffrey was there. I think he's always going to, you know, have some playing time on an NFL team. But I think it's going to take like an injury for him to be like a consistent RB1. But, you know, we're just projecting at this point. I think he can get the draft capital, and that's what all we really care about.
He still does not have the big plays that, you know, that I love to see. And so, you know, like that part does kind of worry me with him. He just doesn't seem to have that like breakaway speed. And so he might just bomb the combine, and then maybe he will be just truly an NFL backup. But I did not give him enough credit at the beginning of the season, middle of the season, or end of the season here until just now. So I will definitely admit that I was wrong there. He is better than Tank Bigsby.
How much do you all care about Jaheim Bell, the tight end from South Carolina, entering the transfer portal? He does have a little bit of NFL stock. He looked really good for South Carolina at the end of the season, was a big part in their 2 upset wins. So do you all care about his potential landing spot?
Is he a tight end?
Yeah.
Yes. No, got it.
No, I do not.
I mean, no. If you're an athletic tight end, it doesn't matter where you play. And that's all the NFL really cares about. So as long as you can run really fast and jump really high and you're 250 pounds, then and you can catch the ball, then you're an NFL tight end. Doesn't really matter.
And honestly, like his stats didn't really even show athleticism this year. Now they did last year.
Yeah.
But like he had 16.6 yards per reception last year. To me, that shows athleticism. Like you can see athleticism in that stat. This year he had 9.2. Now I'm going to go ahead and blame Slovis and not
Rattler.
Oh, Rattler.
Yeah,
same guy.
Same difference for sure.
Yeah, same player. I'm going to go ahead and blame Rattler there, but 9.2 is not good. So I'm
not going to say same player. We did beat Slovis. Unfortunately, Tennessee did not beat Rattler, but let's move past that.
Oof. Well, sorry to bring that up.
Yeah, I don't know why you brought that up. That was you're just you're a masochist there, buddy. But I don't know much more about this transfer portal that I actually care to talk about. Other than that, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot going on with your C2C leagues where it truly will matter. But this isn't the Full Tilt C2C podcast, so we're not here to talk about that stuff. Not yet. We might get there. We might. I'll probably have to join. Like what 5 or 6 more, like Andy is there.
Yeah. And the transfer portal is not going to be done either. Like it's going to be going on all
it's like
season,
45 days, and I think it just opened up, like officially a couple days ago. So I mean,
there's going to be more names going in.
Yeah, so I think so. I'm actually wondering because there's still some big name, not big name. There's some QBs that were kind of thrown into the mix, in like the 23 mix for the NFL draft that I still haven't actually said anything about transferring, but I feel like some of them probably will end up transferring, and we'll just have to wait and see. Like I said, there's plenty of time to talk about all that, but these are the players that actually stood out so far. But we're close to the hour mark here. I don't know if we want to go ahead and do the last segment or not. We don't have to. But why don't we take a quick break and then we'll get back and we'll figure out if we're going to do that one or not.
I'm going to take the guy I was the highest on amongst our entire group in the rookie draft. I'm going to take George Pickens here. I think he's one of the players that has shown out more and more. He's I know. He's a human highlight reel. The team is clearly comfortable enough moving away to send Chase Claypool off to not be used in Chicago and to kind of use Pickens more than Deontay Johnson. I mean, as much as we want to jump on this train.
But their targets, okay, but what do you mean use more? Like Deontay has 94 targets. Pickens has 57.
I agree with that.
That's like a lot more.
Every time a stat line comes out, Pickens is always the lean receiver on that team.
Did you end up listening to that pod?
I did. I especially tuned in for that, and it's too bad we don't get fantasy points per target. But if we did, Deontay Johnson would be the best player ever.
But one thing that truly bothered me about that was like the majority of Deontay Johnson's targets came in the first 3 or 4 weeks with Mitchell Trubisky. So I feel like we're just ignoring at that point, the complete rest of the season. But that to be said, I also think that people are too quick to move a guy like George Pickens up to a top 12 dynasty wide receiver and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from just listening to that pod that we could probably, and I'm not just blaming those guys. I feel like it's a community thing here where you can say you're too quick to do a lot, but looking at certain metrics, looking at certain stats can really skew your idea of a player. And you could say, oh, well, Deontay Johnson has more targets than George Pickens. It's like, well, yeah, but what's happened the last 8 weeks, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, it's just not a good situation there no matter what happens. So
have you ever actually seen them in the same room? I'm not even sure that they're not the same player.
Yeah, now that you mention it, no.
All right, so I think we have enough time. We're not that far over. We can go ahead and talk a little bit about our last our last segment here. But real quick before we get into that, I just want to talk about Underdog Fantasy, who we're presented by, proudly presented by Underdog Fantasy. I talked about last week how the main pod, the flagship pod, always talks about their picks for the Pick'ems contest, where you pick your overs and unders, whether it be yardage or touchdowns or whatever it might be. And they always go over their picks, who they think are going to be the best ones to return their money. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. But it's a lot of fun. You can win pretty good money there. But the best part is you can actually get some free money by using our promo code Full Tilt at Underdog Fantasy. Go to Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code Full Tilt, and you will have your deposit matched up to $100 today. And go do the Pick'ems contest. Listen to the flagship pod, the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast, so you can hear who they think are the best picks of the week. But why don't we go ahead and get into what is being called the duality of man, as I'm reading on the show sheet. We're getting into it tonight, and it's actually it's a good title. So, Who made the right decision? We have JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, going pro. He decided to go ahead and skip the bowl game, skip the season, skip everything. He just never came back, and that was sad, but I get it. Or we have the opposite. Kayshon Boutte, who we did not talk about today, decided to go ahead and return to school, which was definitely a surprise to a lot. I don't think it's a huge surprise. And if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and start out with this one. And I think they both made the right decision. I think that JSN proved everything he needed to prove. Actually, I feel like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave proved everything they needed to prove this year in the NFL to make JSN look that much better. If they had both busted, then maybe he's like, all right, I got to come back. I got to get back in there and I got to do something. But he bested both of them, and then they are considered they're both considered top 12 dynasty wide receivers right now. So I feel like whether you're talking about NFL purposes or even or fantasy purposes, it doesn't matter. They were both top 15 NFL draft picks, and they're both top 12 fantasy football dynasty draft picks, and then now you're talking about a guy that bested both of them. I think he made the right call, because all he can really do at this point is go out there and not be 100%. And then he screws up everything. He loses a full round or whatever of draft stock, like Kayshon Boutte did by coming back probably not fully healthy this year. And he just destroyed his draft stock. He absolutely destroyed it. He has to come back. It doesn't make any sense for him to go into the NFL right now. He was considered the top, or at least one of the top wide receivers in the draft class 2 years ago. And then he had the terrible injury. I kind of feel like it was an Achilles at this point. I know we don't have a confirmation about anything, but it kind of feels like it was an Achilles. I know there was a lot of speculation of what it could be or couldn't be or anything like that, but he has not looked right. Malik Neighbors has been better than him this entire season. And I like Neighbors. I'm not trying to talk shit about Neighbors, but you can't go get first round draft capital when you're getting beat out by a sophomore, on your own team. So I feel like they both made the right call, and I like it. I liked it. Boutte I think I heard a pod recently. They were talking about Boutte just had a kid, I think. And so he can get some NIL money and, take care of his kid, go get, better draft capital for next year, and, do exactly what Chris Olave did when everyone's like, oh, what is Chris Olave doing? Well, he was trying to go from a second round pick to a first round pick. That's all he was trying to do. And guess what he did? He got a team to trade up 2 first round picks to get him in, the top 15 of the NFL draft. So I love both of their decisions. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. Like you said, exactly my thoughts, basically. I talked about it it on the Devi recap, which comes out on Tuesdays at in the morning for anyone willing to listen to that. It's like 5 minutes long, doesn't take long at all. But I made all the exact same points. Like JSN, the season was lost. He played in like 3 games. He didn't finish any of them, I don't think, except for maybe that game against whatever the MAC team they played. But he was barely used in that game too. So it makes no sense. Like I get Buckeye fans probably want him back because they're in a game that matters, but they're likely not going to win that game for one. And if he goes out there and gets, bracketed by Keely Ringo for 4 quarters, what has he done to like improve his draft stock? Nothing. So the fact that he didn't play hardly at all this year, he has that season a year ago to fall back on. And you made it the same point that I was saying too with Olave and Garrett Wilson. Like they're in the NFL doing things right now. And he was statistically the best receiver on that team last year. Now I know that included like the one game against whoever, I don't even remember who it was, but
where they weren't there.
Yeah, it was just JSN and Olave and Garrett Wilson were taking a rest day. I think it was the bowl game because they weren't in the playoffs. So Olave and Garrett Wilson had, and then JSN went for like 350 yards receiving during that game. But he had the best season out of them, and it wasn't like the rest of the season he wasn't doing anything. He was still playing really well. So yeah, he's already got it down there. And then Kayshon Boutte, absolutely. He went back, not 100%, and he hurt his draft stock. So he needs to go back, and you made a good point again, which I didn't say on the Devi recap. He can get this NIL money, which is going to definitely be more money than he would be making as a second-round draft pick in his rookie season, playing for LSU, because we know that they've got, a collective that's paying out their ears. So I agree. I think Kayshon Boutte and JSN made the right call. Kayshon's is a little bit harder to stomach for some Devi players because I'm sure they wanted him to get going right now, especially if you've had a lot of assets invested into him. But in the long run, I think it is the better move for Boutte.
We are a fantasy football podcast. So I must ask, what is the earliest you're willing to take JSN in a Superflex rookie draft today? If you had one right now.
I'd say probably like 106.
Yeah,
105, 106.
105. That was pretty much exactly what I would say.
Is Josh Downs above him at this point for you all? And I know both of you all really like him.
I do.
But, yeah,
I'd still have JSN above Downs.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, it's between JSN and Addison. Like, you can flip a coin between them. Maybe not flip a coin, but I think I kind of like Addison a little bit more. Just because it's probably a bit of recency bias, but
he has a more complete profile.
Yeah. And then after that, JSN just based solely on that mega season a year ago. And then it goes, Quentin Johnson or Downs. And then after that, it kind of falls off.
It's Downs. Downs is 3. Quentin Johnston, come on. Man.
No,
Downs is 3. But seriously, I think it's the top 2. It's Addison, JSN. Honestly, for them, it'll probably come down to like where they go. Landing spot. I'm perfectly fine in the same tier, moving guys around and doing all that kind of stuff. But like, I'm not going to go, oh, well, where did Quentin Johnston go? Like that kind of, I'm not moving a guy like that above those players because he ended up in a different landing spot. But if Addison, ends up in what I consider a not great landing spot and JSN lands in a great one, then, maybe I'm going to go ahead. Oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take JSN number 1. It just really depends. Like we did our mock draft a couple months ago and I took Addison number 1 just because JSN wasn't on the field. But I've scrapped this whole season for JSN. Like I just don't care. Like this season never happened. But last season did, and he was a stud. And we've already seen it with other guys, with Jamar Chase. And I'm not comparing him to Jamar Chase, but he had maybe not that level of season, but he had a very good season. Especially, now that we have true context of who the other players were, and it just adds to that season even more so. And the player that the team you were talking about was Utah. and he had 347 yards and 3 touchdowns against Utah in week 13 there.
Utah was running out their third string running back as their starting cornerback in that game because they had so many
Gross.
depleted defensive backs.
Lucas might not have heard
me.
me. It was 347.
Yes, I
receiving
completely
yards.
hear you. That was a really fun game, though, even though there was no defense. But it was still
Hey,
fun.
Lucas, go run for 347 yards. Don't even catch a ball or anything. Just go run for 347 yards. Let me know how you feel there, buddy.
I don't know if I can make 50 yards, honestly.
No, after the first 100, I'd have to take a breather. But piggybacking off of Lucas's question, though, let's look at the opposite end or the other end of the spectrum. Where would you take Kayshon Boutte in a Devy draft right now if you were starting up?
Whether it's injury related or the fact that, I've talked about in the past how he never had a full season. He never had a complete season to like a JSN where you can go look at that one season. He had flashes, and I'm not trying to talk shit about Kayshon Boutte. Like, I liked him. He was at one point he was my wide receiver 2. He was never my wide receiver 1, but he was my wide receiver 2 in the class. And so I'm not trying to act like I hated him all the time or anything like that. But with the season that he had coming back, I cannot be all about him. I can't be all in on him. Once again, I like Malik Neighbors, but once he bested him or beat him out, I can't be all in. Somebody's always going to be ahead of me or want Kayshon Boutte more than I did. Just like, a week ago, people were saying he's still the wide receiver 1 in this class. He knew he wasn't the wide receiver 1 this class. Like, so how are Devy analysts and Devy, just patrons or whoever, how are they not getting that? Like, things change. You can't just go, oh, well, 2 years ago, unless it's a JSN, Jamar Chase, like that kind of level. And you can go, okay, well, yeah, like, there's some context to it. But he would never had that. He had like 6 game stretches where you go, okay, yeah, like he definitely flashed. I don't know if he's amazing, though.
Yeah, I get it, too. Like, I was fading him last offseason, too, because there was just so much mystery surrounding the injury and the coaching changes. So I'm with you. Like, there's not a chance that I'm going to be the guy that drafts Kayshon Boutte. Now, if he drops, let's say, to like, it would have to be like end of the 3rd round, I think, before I would start to say, all right, I'll give him a shot. But I think once we start getting mock drafts going in the offseason here, he's probably going to end up in like the early 2nd, I would think. But that's going to be way too soon for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know if Lucas has an opinion or not, but
No, I fully
agree.
agree with that. Fully agree with that. He was going around the 1-2 turn last offseason, wherever he still had a bunch of hype going in. I think with people knowing that he's coming out in a year, like he doesn't really have much of a choice other than that. And he did look really good in the SEC championship game. I am expecting probably early 2nd will be what his ADP ends up being.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen anything confirming anything. Maybe you have, but I've heard a lot of people talking about Jaden Daniels being back and all that. Like, I guess I kind of assumed that he would, that he would declare, but apparently not. Or maybe that's just once again what people are assuming, and we'll find out differently here in a little bit. I think they have maybe the same like 45 days to declare or whatever it is. Like that, they still have some time, but you would think it would happen soon. But like, what's truly changing if it is Jaden Daniels? Like, what's going to change? Are you just going to say he's healthier? I commend him for like going back and trying to better his season and do all that. I'm not trying to say he made the wrong choice, because I think he did make the right choice. But at the same time, I don't know that I want to bet on it either.
Yeah, no, then I'm with you. Like, what is going to change if Jaden Daniels comes back? And we don't know what he's going to do. Like, I think they have 45 days after like the bowl games, so it's a while before they have to. I'm not sure when it is. It's because they must have to do it at some point soon. I don't know. Don't ask me.
Well, I mean, LSU has a bowl game, right? I mean, so like
Yeah,
they haven't played yet. So I can assume that they wouldn't ask, or he wouldn't say like, "Oh, I'm definitely out." You know, like I'm
Right.
definitely declaring.
I think that's the thing.
until
He's
that
probably
bowl
going to
game
play
is
the
done.
Citrus Bowl. I think that's the one they're in, and then he'll probably make the decision after that, because other guys will declare and then just say, "I'm opting out of the bowl game." So it doesn't sound like he's going to do that.
They have until January 16th to declare for the NFL draft if you are an underclassman. So if you are declaring early, you must notify them by January 16th. And you are exactly right. It is the Citrus Bowl.
Got that.
Perfect. That's why you listen. For that accuracy. Unless we're talking about athletic directors, then we have none. Or what year Izzy Bonaconda played in, or what year he is. Then we have no accuracy whatsoever. But it's just the one guy. So all right, we're definitely a little over time now, but I thought it was a great pod. A lot of good info here that we talked about, and I'm sure there's probably going to be more. Although I don't know how much I'm going to truly care about the extra players or other players that are jumping in. I guess we probably are the only podcast that didn't mention Colorado at all in this podcast. So why don't you, Andy? I don't know if you ever actually like finished the podcast. So why don't you go ahead and finish us off with like a final thought of the Colorado, I don't even know, extravaganza, like whatever the right word is.
So he's bringing in Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. He's bringing in like a lot of these guys from JSN or from Jackson State. That these highly touted recruits like Travis Hunter, who was the number one recruit. He's going to come. His son Shedeur Sanders, who was a 4-star quarterback recruit in 2020, he's coming over, and he was awesome for Jackson State. Not Travis Hunter. I said him, but Kevin Coleman was a wide receiver prospect who was like a high 4-star last year. He's probably going to come over. So it really just transforms the whole team. And then everyone probably saw his speech. I'm coming, where he's coming. And the one guy took his hat off because he was so scared of him. But, I don't know if I'm at Colorado as a player, I think I'm probably a little skeptical, but at the same time, you just went 1-11. So you're like, well, maybe we do suck and we don't deserve to play. So you're either going to take it as a motivation to, get better, and this guy's going to help you do that, or you're just going to be like, I'm out of here. I don't want to be around for this. It sounds awful. But I think it's a good move for Colorado, and they're going to sell a lot of tickets, and they're going to get a lot of recruits from like the Barstool money, who's like connected to Coach Prime. So, it's good for them. They're going to be better, but they're in the Pac-12, which might not exist in 2 years. So, I mean, this helps raise their profile though, right? So if they do end up doing like super conferences, Colorado, I think immediately has a case to be put into one of them. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I like that. And also, what do you think? Does it help out my boy Jordan Tyson?
Jordan Tyson.
That's
you're gonna have to help me out.
He's a wide receiver that was already on Colorado.
Oh my god!
And yeah, he's my new hype piece. He's going to be the guy that I fall in love with over the course of, or actually I already did. So he doesn't even but I'm going to hype the hell out of him.
Oh, the
entire
freshman
offseason.
I saw them tweet about him actually, like what coach said. Oh, he got named to a Pac-12 freshman All-American. So
yeah, he did.
Yeah,
no,
so I do know Jordan Tyson.
Yeah, I don't even think it was Pac-12. I think it was just the All-American. It was honorable mention, but he got named to the honorable mention All-American.
All right. Well, he was also definitely Pac-12 freshman All-American, which would make sense if he was honorable mention for the national team. But yeah, so I do know who he is. I apologize for.
Yeah, but he got hurt. He only played 9 games, but his last 3 games before he got hurt, he had like 100 and something yards each one. And if you look at that offense, I mean, you already talked about how they only won 1 game. The offense wasn't amazing. So, you start looking at the context of the offense and all that, and he stood out. and I've gotten a lot of not a lot, but I've been talking with some people, and I've been given some shit about Jordan Tyson here, and I might actually have a bet going. It's a scary one. It's a risky one for me because it's not a name that you would think you would be betting Jordan Tyson against. I don't even know if I want to mention him.
Yeah, what are we
But,
talking about here?
Jordan Tyson versus Luther Burden. Who's going to have the better college career? That's
man.
where we're going here.
And you took Tyson?
I don't even know if we've actually like officially done it, but I get a couple beers in me, I'll probably go ahead and shake a hand.
Luther Burden, man. He doesn't have Dominic Lovett to compete with anymore.
Yeah, but he couldn't even beat out Dominic Lovett. Like, once again, we look at what
He's
happens
gone.
on the field.
Remember, targets are earned.
Oh,
That's right, baby. Targets are earned. All right, we've gone long enough. We've gone off the rails. Some idiot was talking about Jordan Tyson over Dominic or over Luther Burden. But why don't we go ahead and get out of here? Lucas, get us out of here.